We're now going to hear from Ben. Ben Travers, who I'm sure most of you will know, has been manager of London Museum Development Programme since responsibility transferred to the Museum of London in 2010. His museum career began with voluntary roles at local museums. I think everyone has been here at Brent Museum, and curatorial roles at national museums such as the RAF Museum. Like Isabel, he went on to work for 3 sector-led organisations. All of them have got three-letter acronyms, I think, but at regional rather than national area. So the South East Museum Service, MLA London, and now London Museum Development, as well as having a stint as an MDO for Kent. So Ben, please, can you take the stage? Thank you.
Hi, morning everybody. Great to see so many of you here. In fact, we had incredible demand for this event. We were booked kind of 3 times over, so I think there's a bit of a learning point next time to get a bigger venue. But anyway, good to see you all. I'm going to talk about the London Museum Survey, and hopefully you'll have seen the headlines paper that we've produced. It's sitting on seats, and there's also plenty of other copies around the venue, so feel free to take another one if you need more for back at base. Where are we? Okay. So, by way of background, just to say a bit about the Mendoza Review. You've been hearing a lot about Mendoza from Isabel, obviously, already. But one of the other things that the Mendoza Review also talks about is the importance of data to the sector. The importance of data in enabling museums to benchmark against each other, to kind of set their objectives appropriately, but also in terms of the headline stories, the kind of headline stories that we're able to tell through that paper, the importance of making the case really to key stakeholders and funders and to lever in resources. So it is an important activity. The 9 regional museum development services in England have been given a lead responsibility in England for collecting data right across the sector. So that's the background to the exercise that we were trying to get you all to do over the last summer just gone. So specifically, the museum development surveys, the surveys that each of the regional services run in each region, they're about accredited museums within the accreditation scheme, and they're about non-national museums. So obviously the national museums, they already do a lot of reporting in to their sponsoring government department, and the regional, national, and international reach those institutions have is very well documented already. So obviously our focus is very much on the non-nationals. So in terms of the London exercise, the value really is in telling the story about those 126 non-national accredited museums and the specific role they make to the specific contribution they make to the cultural life of the capital. So first of all, who participated in the first London Museum Survey 2018? So this map here is of all accredited non-national museums in London. So of those museums, 38% participated in the survey first time around. So 38%, that's a respectable return for a first time out. It's not too bad. But it does make it difficult to draw conclusive conclusions about the entire sector. And really what needs to happen is that as participation increases over the following years, we should be able to begin to spot trends around, concerning audiences, workforce, financial sustainability, and so on. We should be able to spot those trends as the participation level increases as we go forward. The map does also show, perhaps not surprisingly, a concentration of museums in the central London boroughs. And what the map, of course, doesn't even show is the fact that the national museums, and indeed, the other iconic cultural attractions, they're also concentrated in the central boroughs. And as I've been saying, the international reach of those institutions is very well recognised indeed. Meanwhile, we have a challenge with Outer London, a much smaller cultural infrastructure there, much more difficult for communities in outer London to access the smaller infrastructure that is there. And this was a point that was again firmly underlined by the latest refresh that the GLA did of their culture strategy, which was published last December. However, the good news is that we got a very good return in the survey from outer London, and specifically we got a good return from the local authority museum sector, which is the predominant type of museum in outer London. So the blue dots there, each of those represents a return from a local authority museum. And the map does show the point quite graphically about their importance in the kind of outer London infrastructure. The overall return rate from local authority museums was 83%, 19 out of 23 sites. So that's a statistically robust sample, and that does enable us to draw firm conclusions about the sector and where it's at. A bit more by way of background about the sector, and a lot of this I'm sure you know already. Key to the cultural life of the capital, a few of these local authority museums have collections of regional and national significance. Quite a few of them, have a preeminent reputation in community engagement, drawing heavily on their social history collections. And of course, what all of them have is all of them are able to tell great local stories and are in a very good position to foster a sense of place, working closely alongside the borough archive services that are often co-located with them. So let's take a look at some of the headline stats from the survey about local authority museums. Looking at audiences first of all. So survey shows that these museums attract at least 500,000 visitors. They attracted at least 500,000. In fact, I think it was 526,000 in 2017 to 18 of those from those museums participating in the survey. That's an average of just under 30,000 per museum. For some reason, we often tend to think of London's local authority museums as small. Certainly they're small compared to the big city regional local authority museums you tend to find outside London. And also you could say that they're small in terms of, average staffing levels. So there's an average staffing level per local authority museum of 5.5 full-time equivalent. So that's pretty small. But judged in terms of audience reach, they're not small. So one would be classed as extra large with audiences of over 100,000. Two would be judged as large with audiences over 50,000, and 11 of them would be judged as medium-sized with audiences over 10,000. So that really does bring home the really excellent value for money that these services provide for their councils. A few more headline stats. So economic impact. The economic impact of the museums participating, at least 13 million. So that's an average of nearly $750,000 per borough. And that's based on visitor spend, and it's also based on the spend by the museums themselves on goods and services. So again, that's an average of nearly £750,000 per borough. Educational activities. So 27% of local authority museum visits were by children. So that compares really well to the proportion achieved by the nationals over the same period, which was 17%. 2,000 sessions delivered over that time, attracting over 67,000 people. So that really does show that they've kept themselves really busy in this area, despite maybe nearly all of those services having lost their specialist education staff over the last 8 years during the really difficult financial period that they've been through. They've managed to keep going and do really good things in this area. So again, showing the value for money that they provide in terms of key council objectives like educational attainment. And coming to income generation, So, yeah, I mean, by way of a bit of a background on this, I mean, it's well attested that, you know, there's a huge proportion of public funding going to the central London boroughs, and obviously, you know, you have the big national institutions in the central boroughs. But what is less, a story that's less often told, is the relatively quite thin level of public funding going to outer London. So 16 of the outer London boroughs, that's by far most of them, they on average attract, well, they all have less than £1 million in public funding from the likes of ACE and DCMS per annum at the moment. But they are working really hard to buck that trend. So the museums themselves are doing really well on self-generated income, attracting on average over 350,000 per museum. So they're working really hard in that respect as well. So, by way of a wrap-up, to summarise some of the key benefits of this exercise. So, really useful for benchmarking. An obvious benefit, it enables services to compare with each other, and that in turn helps inform planning, appropriate objective setting, and so on. There's a lot more data available in the detailed report that's going to sit on our website. So certainly from the point of view of benchmarking, there's a lot of information that can be mined in there about how museums, large and small, of all shapes and sizes, are in there. Admittedly, only 38% of London museums so far, but what is there is broken down by type and by shape size for you to have a look at. Obvious benefits around advocacy, so you know, we've been keen to make good use of the data in this first year to do a job with the local authorities on advocating about those museums. And we're ready to go again from next June. We're going to be the survey is going to be hitting the streets again in June. So obviously, the higher the return from all of you, the stronger position we're going to be in to tell stories about your museum and your part of the sector. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Hello, sorry, Alice from the Household Cavalry Museum. Ben, I'm sorry if I'm not reading this correctly. The figures on the local authority museums in London are fantastic. Did your feedback for independent non-national museums not give you enough data to pull these types of statistics? Or are those available? I'd be really interested to know, you know, visitor numbers on average, staff on average, that type of thing.
We get the next question and then,
Yeah, so on the survey, so the detailed report will be sitting on our website, and there'll be a lot of information in there which you can mine about how independents of different sizes are faring in all those areas. It's just that proportionately, the number of independents responding so far is quite small, so we can't tell top-line stories, because you can imagine, if you think of the scale of the independent museums in London, it's ranging from some of the huge ones which participated, like the Horniman, you know, with their visitor figures of nearly 1 million, compared to the smallest volunteer-run ones, and in different parts of London as well. So it is broken down by type of museum and by extra large, medium, small, etc. So there is some sort of comparative value in there for you to have a look at. And of course, you know, by the nature of the exercise, the data is anonymised. So, you know, occasionally, you know, to give balance to the narrative, we can say things like, yeah, well, this particular area here is a bit skewed because it just so happened that, you know, the Horniman and a couple of other, or Museum of London responded to this question, which is why it looks really odd, you know, for those boroughs to appear to have such large figures, whereas Hampton Court in the West didn't respond, and therefore it would have looked. So yeah, we're able to do a little bit of that, but as a rule, the data is anonymised because it has to be, you know, because obviously we want to encourage people to participate. But yes, you know, there is some benchmarking comparative value in there now, and that can only grow as more people participate. And then the other thing, of course, is that if other parts of the sector do participate, then maybe next year we can tell headline stories about them instead.
Yes, the desire absolutely is to be able to tell a national story. So around what Mendoza's asking us to do, to have a better handle on data about the health of the sector overall, I'm really keen that we're able to look at the MD data region by region in 30 different ways, but also look at it nationally. So that's a direction of travel.
Any more questions? Or people keen to go? Oh, there's one over here.
Rebecca O'Dell, Hackney Museum. Very quick thing about the survey. Could we just get a bit more information about the self-generated income? Does that include money from the local authorities towards the museum? Just because otherwise that's a very large figure.
The self-generated income is just self-generated, nothing to do with revenue funding at all, or the regular funding. So it's based on grant funding, contributed income, so that seems like donations and etc. And what's the other thing? Contributed, but earned income. So that's the full range of retail, venue hire, all of that stuff. And it does include instances where a few boroughs have attracted some quite meaty capital investment in that particular year, because the year in question is 2017 to 18, so it includes that as well. That applies to a relatively small number of boroughs, but that's what the average though is based on.
Was it quite a range in?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, if you think, so maybe of those, 19 services, I think it was just 4 that had significant capital investment. But what I've tried to do is I've tried to, for the infographics, for your councillors and key stakeholders, I've tried to put out the key stories and infographics, but then on the inside, I've tried to give key detail, and there is a lot of detail sitting underneath all this by means of footnotes, so that people know, that it is a statistically robust conclusion, basically. And hopefully that will give you an idea. And if that still doesn't help, then you can always look at the detailed reports on the website.